Mike stood by the back of the large moving truck, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead with a dusty rag. It was a typical Friday afternoon in Los Angeles, meaning the heat was sweltering and the traffic on the freeway was already a nightmare. He had been working for Swift Movers for 3 years now. It wasn't a dream job, carrying heavy sofas and boxes up 5 flights of stairs, but it was honest work. Well, mostly honest. The real problem wasn't the lifting or the long hours. Mike was strong and he didn't mind sweating for a paycheck. The problem was the man sitting in the air-conditioned office inside the warehouse. That was Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance was the kind of boss who counted paper clips to make sure none went missing. He didn't care if his employees hurt their backs, he only cared that the truck was unloaded and the invoice was paid in full. If a customer offered a mover a glass of water, Vance told them to refuse it so they wouldn't waste company time. Mike watched as the metal warehouse door rolled up with a loud rattle. Mr. Vance stormed out, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. He looked angry, his face red and his tie loose around his neck. "Listen up, everyone," Vance shouted, even though there were only 3 movers standing there. "The numbers for this week are terrible. We are behind on our quotas. If we don't pick up the pace, I'm going to start cutting hours. I don't care if you have to work twice as fast." Mike sighed, leaning against the truck. He worked harder than anyone else. He always taped the furniture correctly so it wouldn't scratch during the drive. He always put the boxes in the right room so the customers didn't have to move them again. But Vance didn't see that. Vance only saw the dollar signs. To Vance, Mike was just a body to lift boxes, not a person with feelings. Suddenly, the company phone on Vance's belt started ringing. It was a loud, annoying chirp. Everyone stopped talking and looked at him. Vance answered it, his face changing from angry to a weird kind of excitement. He listened for a long time, nodding his head and saying yes, sir, and I understand over and over again. Then, he finally hung up. "We got a rush job," Vance said, a greedy smile spreading across his face. "And this is a big one. A very private client in the Hollywood Hills. They need a full truck moved by this evening. This is our chance to make some real money." He pointed a finger at Mike and another guy named Dave who was sitting in the driver's seat. "You two are taking the truck. But listen to me closely. This client is rich. Filthy rich. I want you to sell everything. If they need a piano moved, tell them it requires a special team fee. If they ask you to wrap a TV, charge for the premium packaging materials. Do not do anything for free. Do not be nice. Be fast and charge them for every second." Mike felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He hated these kinds of jobs. Usually, the rich clients were rude, and they treated the movers like they were invisible. But he didn't have a choice. He needed the paycheck. He had rent due, and his old car was making a funny noise he couldn't afford to fix. "Okay, boss," Mike said quietly. "We're on it." "Good," Vance said, turning back to the office. "And make sure you get the credit card info before you unload a single box. Don't let them charm you." Mike and Dave climbed into the cab of the big moving truck. The air conditioning didn't work very well, so they rolled down the windows to let the hot air blow through. As they drove out of the warehouse and merged onto the busy highway, Dave looked over at Mike. "Who do you think it is?" Dave asked, turning up the radio to drown out the truck's loud engine. Vance looked like he was going to explode with excitement. "I don't know," Mike said, keeping his eyes on the road. "Probably some movie producer or a tech guy. You know how they are, They want everything done yesterday and they don't want to pay for it? I heard it's an actor, Dave said, lowering his voice like someone might hear him over the wind. The dispatcher said the name on the file sounded familiar. She wouldn't tell me who, though. Mike shrugged. Actors were just people to him. He had moved a few famous people before. Some were nice, some were mean. But today, with Vance's warning about money fresh in his mind, Mike felt extra pressure. He wasn't a greedy person. He believed that if you did a good job, you should get paid fairly. But Vance didn't want fair, he wanted to take advantage of people. He wanted to squeeze every penny out of the client, and Mike hated being part of that. The drive to the Hollywood Hills took about an hour. They drove from the busy, flat streets of the industrial district up into the winding, green hills where the houses were hidden behind tall gates and tall trees. The air got a little cleaner, and the noise of the city faded away below them. Finally, they turned onto a narrow road. The GPS on the dashboard led them to a massive iron gate. It looked old and expensive, with vines growing on the stone pillars next to it. Mike stopped the truck and pressed the intercom button. "Swift movers," Mike said into the speaker. "Come on up," a voice replied immediately. The gate swung open slowly, as if by magic. Mike drove the truck up a long driveway. It was paved with cobblestones and curved around a large fountain. At the top of the hill sat a huge house. It wasn't one of those super modern glass boxes you see in magazines, it looked more like a comfortable, expensive estate with a big wooden porch and lots of trees. "Wow," Dave said, looking out the window. "Check out those motorcycles in the garage." Mike glanced over as they passed an open garage door. There was a row of sleek, black motorcycles parked under a cover. He knew a little about bikes, those looked expensive. He pulled the truck up near the front door and turned off the engine. The silence of the hillside settled around them, contrasting with the noise of the city they had just left. "Okay, let's get this over with," Mike said, opening his door and jumping down to the pavement. He stretched his back and adjusted his work gloves. "Remember, try to be nice. Even if Vance is a shark, we don't have to be." They walked to the back of the truck and lowered the heavy metal ramp with a clang. Just as they were pulling out the first dolly, the front door of the house opened. Mike looked up, expecting to see a butler or a personal assistant in a suit. Instead, a man in a simple t-shirt and jeans walked out. He had dark hair and looked kind of tired, but he had a warm smile on his face. He wasn't wearing any fancy watch or jewelry. He just looked like a regular guy who happened to live in a mansion. "Hey guys," the man said, walking down the steps with his hands casually in his pockets. "Thanks for coming so fast. I know it's a mess in there. I really appreciate the help." Mike stepped forward, wiping his dusty hands on his pants, trying to look professional. "Hi. We're from Swift Movers. Are you?" The man smiled and extended his hand. "Yeah, I'm Keanu. Thanks for being here." Mike froze for a second. He looked at the man's face properly. It wasn't just a guy who looked like him. It was actually him. The famous action star. The guy from the movies everyone loves. Mike had grown up watching his films. But standing there in a t-shirt, Keanu Reeves didn't feel like a distant movie star. He felt like a neighbor asking for help. Nice to meet you," Mike stammered, shaking his hand. "I'm Mike. This is Dave." "Nice to meet you, Mike and Dave," Keanu said, nodding politely at Dave. "Look, I have a bit of a situation. I need to get a lot of this stuff into the living room by tonight, but there's a bit of a problem with one of the items. I was hoping you could help me figure it out." Mike looked at his boss's text message on his phone. "Charge for everything. Do not work for free." Then he looked at Keanu, who was looking at him with honest, hopeful eyes. Mike took a deep breath. He knew exactly what Mr. Vance would want him to do. He would want to charge Keanu an extra consultation fee just to look at the problem. But looking at Keanu Reeves, Mike just couldn't be that guy. "We'll get it done," Mike said firmly. "Whatever the problem is, we'll figure it out." And with that simple promise, Mike had no idea that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career, at least according to his boss. Keanu held the door open wide, gesturing for them to come inside. As Mike walked past him, he noticed that the actor didn't have any security guards or personal assistants hovering around. It was just him in a big, quiet house. The inside of the home was beautiful, with high ceilings and wooden floors, but it was clearly in the middle of a transition. There were stacks of boxes labeled books and kitchen lining the hallway. A few framed photos leaned against the walls, waiting to be hung up. It didn't feel like a cold museum, it felt like a home that was being lived in. "Sorry about the mess," Keanu said, his voice sounding a bit raspy. "I'm trying to get everything organized before the weekend. I didn't realize how much stuff I actually had until I had to pack it all up." "It happens all the time, sir," Mike said politely, stepping over a pile of rugs. "We see this a lot, don't worry about it. We're used to navigating through tight spaces." Dave, the other mover, was busy wheeling the heavy dolly into the foyer. He was looking around with wide eyes, trying to spot any movie memorabilia, but the house just looked normal. There were no gold trophies on display, just a few plants and some comfortable-looking furniture covered in drop cloths. Keanu rubbed the back of his neck, looking a bit stressed. "I appreciate you guys being cool about this. The last moving company I called canceled on me last minute because of the traffic. I was kind of in a panic." "We're here now," Mike said, trying to sound reassuring. "Just show us the heavy stuff, and we'll get the ball rolling." Keanu nodded and led them down a long hallway toward the back of the house. "Most of the boxes are just going into the garage, but there is one thing I really need help with. It's the most important thing, and honestly, I'm a bit nervous about moving it." They walked into a large sunroom at the back of the house. In the corner, sitting in a patch of afternoon sunlight, was a beautiful grand piano. It was black and shiny, looking heavy and expensive. Mike knew immediately that this was going to be a challenge. Pianos were notoriously difficult to move. They weighed hundreds of pounds, and if you tipped them the wrong way, you could ruin the legs or the internal mechanics. "She's a beauty," Mike said, walking around the instrument to inspect the legs. "But she's heavy. Is this going out to the garage?" "Actually, no," Keanu said, looking toward a set of sliding glass doors that led to a patio. "I want it in the guest house. It's just down the path, past the pool." "But, there's a problem." Mike and Dave exchanged a glance. "What kind of problem?" Dave asked. "The door to the guest house," Keanu explained. "It's an older building. The frame is kind of narrow. I tried to measure it, but I'm not sure if the piano is going to fit through. The previous owners just had it sitting in the main living room of the guest house, so I know it got in there somehow. But I couldn't figure out how they did it." Mike walked over to the glass doors and looked down the stone path. The guest house was a small, charming cottage about 50 yards away. It looked peaceful, but Mike was already doing the math in his head. Moving a grand piano across a flat floor is hard enough. Moving it down a stone path, up a step, and through a narrow door was a nightmare scenario. Mr. Vance's text message flashed in Mike's mind again: charge for everything. Charge for special handling. If Mike told Keanu that this required a special crew or extra equipment, he could easily tack on $500 to the bill. If he told Keanu it was going to take 3 extra hours because of the difficult turn, he could charge a huge delay fee. That was how Vance wanted him to think. But Mike looked at Keanu, who was standing there looking genuinely worried about his piano. It wasn't just an object to Keanu, it was clear he loved music. "Let's go take a look," Mike said. "We'll measure the door." They all walked down the path. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, making the shadows long. When they got to the guest house, Mike pulled out his tape measure. He measured the piano's width at its widest point. Then he measured the door frame. Dave whistled low. "It's close, Mike. It's only about an inch wider than the piano. And that's if we take the door off the hinges. If we don't, it won't fit at all." Keanu sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Is it impossible? I really want it in there. The acoustics in that room are perfect." Mike looked at the tight squeeze. To get it in, they would have to take the legs off the piano, wrap the body in thick blankets to protect it, and then tilt it at a dangerous angle to slide it through the inch of clearance. Then they would have to reassemble it inside. It was back-breaking work that would take hours. And if they scratched it, they were liable. According to company policy, Mike should have stopped right there. He should have called Vance and said, "This is too risky, we need to cancel the piano part or charge a massive risk fee." That was the rule. Vance hated risk. Vance hated spending more than 10 minutes on one item. Mike looked at his phone. He had no signal. Even if he wanted to call, he couldn't. "Well," Keanu asked, looking at Mike with hopeful eyes. "Can we do it?" Mike looked at Dave. Dave was tired, he wanted to go home, and he was waiting for Mike to say no. But Mike saw something in Keanu that he liked. The guy wasn't acting like a superstar. He was acting like a guy who just needed a hand with something he loved. Mike remembered when he moved his own mother into a small apartment last year. The movers had been rude and refused to move her bed unless she paid them double. It had made her cry. Mike promised himself he would never be that guy. "We can do it," Mike said, surprising Dave. "Really?" Keanu asked, his face lighting up. "Are you sure? I don't want you guys to get hurt." "We'll be careful," Mike said confidently. "We have to take the legs off. That's the only way. We wrap it up, we slide it through, and we put it back together inside. It's going to take a while, though. Maybe a few hours." Keanu didn't even blink. "However long it takes. I'm in no rush, thank you. Seriously, thank you." Mike felt a warm feeling in his chest that had nothing to do with the heat. It felt good to solve a problem for someone who actually appreciated it. "All right, Dave," Mike said, clapping his hands together. "Let's get the blankets and the tools. We're going to need to be precise on this one." They went back to the truck and started gathering the heavy moving blankets and the socket set. As they walked back to the piano, Keanu was already there, clearing away small items from the path to make sure they had a clear workspace. He was sweeping the stone path with a broom, making sure there were no pebbles that might make the wheel slip. "You don't have to do that, sir," Mike said. Keanu smiled, leaning on the broom. "I know. but you guys are doing the heavy lifting. The least I can do is make sure you don't trip over a rock." For the next hour, the three of them worked together in the quiet afternoon. Mike and Dave used the specialized skid board to lift the heavy piano gently while Keanu held the blankets in place, ensuring the glossy black finish didn't get a single scratch. The actor was attentive and careful, following Mike's instructions perfectly. When they took the legs off, Keanu held the flashlight so Mike could see the screws clearly. Mike almost forgot about his boss. He almost forgot about the stupid quotas and the threats of being fired. For a while, it was just three guys working on a puzzle, enjoying the satisfaction of hard work. The sun went down, and the patio lights turned on, illuminating the scene. When they finally got the main body of the piano through the narrow doorframe, it was a tight squeeze. The wood scraped the doorframe slightly, making a horrible screeching noise. Everyone froze. "It's fine," Mike said, checking the padding. "The blankets took the hit. We're clear." They pushed the piano into the center of the room. Then came the hardest part, standing it back up and attaching the legs. It required immense strength and balance. Mike got under the heavy end, straining his muscles, his face turning red with exertion. On three, Mike grunted. 1, 2, 3. With a mighty heave, they lifted the piano. Dave guided the metal plate into the leg socket. It clicked into place with a satisfying thud. They repeated this for the other three legs. Finally, it was done. The piano stood proudly in the center of the small guest house living room, looking like it had always been there. Mike wiped the sweat from his face, leaving a smudge of dust on his cheek. He was exhausted. His back ached, and his hands were trembling from gripping the heavy tool handles. He looked at his watch. It was nearly 8 p.m. They had been working on the piano for 4 hours. Keanu sat down on the bench and pressed a key. A deep, rich note filled the room. He smiled and played a simple, sad chord. It sounded beautiful. "It's perfect," Keanu whispered. "You guys have no idea how much this means to me. You saved me a lot of stress." Mike leaned against the doorframe, catching his breath. "It was a tight fit, but we made it work." Keanu stood up and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a thick roll of cash. It wasn't just a $20 bill, it looked like several $100s. He held it out to Mike. "Please, take this. For you and Dave. You stayed late, you worked harder than expected, and you didn't complain. This is for your time." Mike looked at the money. It was a lot. It would cover his rent and his car repairs. He could really use it. But then he thought about Mr. Vance. He thought about the strict rule, no tips. All payments go through the company. If Vance found out Mike took cash directly from a client, especially a famous one, he would accuse Mike of stealing the company's commission. Mike's heart sank. He wanted to take the money. He wanted to take it and tell Vance to shove it. But he knew how these companies worked. They had ways of checking. "I can't, sir," Mike said, pushing Keanu's hand away gently. "Really? I appreciate it, but I can't take it." Keanu looked confused. "Why, you earned it? You did a fantastic job." "It's against company policy," Mike admitted, feeling foolish saying it out loud. "We aren't allowed to take tips. Everything has to go through the office. Just doing our job." Keanu looked at him, his eyes narrowing slightly. He seemed surprised that Mike was turning down the money, but he also looked a bit angry on Mike's behalf. He put the money back in his pocket. That rule sounds terrible, Keanu said. But okay, I respect your honesty. At least let me get you guys some dinner. I ordered pizzas. They should be here in 10 minutes. Mike smiled. Pizza sounds good. But we really should get going. We have to clean up the truck. Come on, Keanu insisted. You can't leave hungry. Not after moving that monster. Mike looked at Dave, who was practically drooling at the thought of pizza. Mike nodded. Okay. Thanks. As they walked back to the main house, Mike felt good. He had done the right thing. He had helped a guy out, done a great job, and even though he turned down the cash tip, he felt a sense of pride that was rare in his line of work. He didn't know that back at the office, the phone was ringing, and his boss was about to find out exactly what Mike had done, or rather, what he hadn't charged for. The calm after the storm was about to break. The smell of pepperoni and melted cheese filled the cool evening air as the delivery driver handed 3 large pizza boxes to Keanu. It was a simple, ordinary moment, yet it felt surreal to Mike. Here was one of the most famous actors in the world, standing on his porch, paying for a delivery just like anyone else. Keanu turned and walked over to where Mike and Dave were sitting on the tailgate of the moving truck, their legs dangling off the back, exhausted but relieved that the piano was safely inside. Come on, guys, Keanu said, waving them over to a stone bench near the front door. Don't eat in the truck. Come sit down. You earned a break. Mike hesitated for a second. It was against every rule in the Swift Movers Handbook to socialize with the client. You were supposed to move the boxes, get the signature, and leave. But his stomach growled loudly, betraying him, and the thought of a hot meal after hours of heavy lifting was too good to pass up. He slid off the tailgate, followed closely by Dave, and they walked over to the bench. Keanu opened the boxes and handed them each a paper plate. I didn't know what you liked, so I got a little of everything. Pepperoni, veggie, and just plain cheese. Thanks, man, Dave said, not waiting another second. He took a huge slice and folded it in half, taking a bite that made him close his eyes in happiness. This is exactly what I needed. Mike took a slice of pepperoni and took a small bite. It was delicious. For a few minutes, nobody spoke. The only sounds were the crickets chirping in the bushes and the quiet noise of them eating. The tension of the difficult piano move slowly drained out of Mike's shoulders. He looked up at the sky, which was now a deep, dark blue filled with bright stars. It felt peaceful, a sharp contrast to the noisy, stressful city they had driven away from earlier that day. Keanu wiped his mouth with a napkin and turned to Mike. So, how long have you been doing this moving furniture, I mean? About 3 years, Mike answered. Before that, I worked in a warehouse, but they closed down. I like the moving part, seeing different parts of the city, helping people start fresh. It's the other stuff that makes it hard. You mean the company part? Keanu asked, his voice soft. Mike nodded. He felt a little awkward complaining to a stranger, even one who seemed so nice, but something about Keanu made it easy to talk. Yeah. My boss, Mr. Vance, he runs a tight ship. Too tight sometimes. Everything is about time and money. If we take 5 minutes too long, we hear about it. If we are too nice, we hear about it. He wants us to be robots, I think. Dave chimed in, his mouth still half full. He's a shark, dude. If he knew we helped you move that piano for 3 hours without charging an extra fee, he'd have a heart attack. He always says, if they want special treatment, they have to pay for it. Keanu looked down at his pizza, a frown crossing his face. He looked genuinely bothered by this. That's terrible. You guys did incredible work today. You saved that piano. That took skill and patience, not just speed. You shouldn't be punished for doing a good job. Mike shrugged, trying to laugh it off. It is what it is. I have bills to pay, so I follow the rules. Well, most of them anyway. Keanu set his plate down on the stone bench and looked Mike straight in the eye. The serious expression on his face made Mike sit up a little straighter. You refused my tip because of the policy. You worked overtime to make sure I was happy because it was the right thing to do. I don't meet people with that kind of integrity very often, especially in this town. People are always trying to get something from you. I just wanted to do a good job, Mike said simply. That's all. And you did more than a good job, Keanu insisted. Look, I can't give you money. I get that. But I am not going to let this go unnoticed. What is the name of your company? Who do I call? Mike felt a sudden wave of panic mixed with hope. Swift Movers. The owner is Mr. Vance. But, be careful. Like I said, he cares about the bottom line. If he finds out we didn't charge extra for the piano, he might not be happy. I can handle Mr. Vance, Keanu said, a slight smile playing on his lips. I'm going to call him tomorrow. I'm going to tell him that you and Dave are the best workers he has. I'm going to tell him that because of you, I'll be recommending his company to all my friends in the industry. That's got to be worth something to him, right? Mike's eyes widened. Recommending the company to famous friends that could bring in huge business. Vance loved big clients. If Keanu Reeves put in a good word, maybe Vance would finally see Mike as an asset instead of just a number. Maybe he would even get that raise he had been asking for last Christmas. That would be amazing, Mike admitted. Honestly, that would help a lot. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad and a pen. He scribbled something down quickly. I'm writing down your names. Mike and Dave. And I'm writing down the date. I won't forget this. They finished the pizza in comfortable silence after that. When the last slice was gone, Keanu stood up and shook both of their hands again. His grip was firm and his hands were warm. I have to go get some rest, but thank you again, Keanu said. Drive safe back to the city. The traffic on the 101 can be tricky this time of night. Will do, Mike said. Take care, sir. Call me Keanu, the actor said with a wave before turning and walking back into his big, quiet house. Mike and Dave climbed back into the truck. The engine roared to life, breaking the silence of the hillside. As Mike steered the big truck down the winding driveway and pushed the button to open the front gate, he felt a strange mix of emotions. He was physically exhausted, his muscles screaming for rest, but mentally, he felt light as a feather. As they drove back down the hill toward the bright lights of Los Angeles, Dave turned down the radio. You think he'll actually call? Dave asked, sounding hopeful. Mike gripped the steering wheel, watching the road curves. I don't know. He seemed like a man of his word. He wrote it down and everything. I think he will. I hope so, Dave said, leaning his head back against the seat. I could really use a bonus, and if Vance gets some big celebrity clients because of this, maybe he'll finally get off our backs about taking lunch breaks. Mike nodded. Yeah. Maybe he'll realize that treating people right is better business than being cheap. For the rest of the drive, Mike thought about the contrast between his boss and Keanu. Mr. Vance was obsessed with squeezing every penny out of a job, even if it meant making the customer unhappy. Keanu, on the other hand, had money to spare but seemed to value honesty and hard work more than the cash itself. Mike felt proud that Keanu had seen that in him. It felt like a validation of everything he believed about being a good person. When they finally pulled back into the Swift Movers warehouse lot, it was nearly 10 p.m. The place was dark, except for a single light shining above the back office door. Mike parked the truck and checked the odometer. They had driven a long way. He carefully filled out the logbook, writing down the times and the mileage. He hesitated when he got to the special instructions section. Should he write about the piano struggle? Should he mention that they took 3 hours longer than planned in the end? He just wrote job completed. Piano moved to guest house. Client satisfied. He didn't want to give Vance any ammunition to yell at them tonight. He would let Keanu's call do the talking. He and Dave locked up the truck and dropped the keys in the night slot. As they walked to their cars in the dim parking lot, the cool night air felt good. Mike unlocked his old sedan and sank into the driver's seat. He was tired, but he was smiling. He felt like he had done something good today, something real. He helped someone out, did an impossible job, and made a new friend, even if that friend was a movie star. He drove home, humming along to a song on the radio, thinking that maybe, just maybe, things were finally going to look up for him. He had no idea that while he was driving home with hope in his heart, Mr. Vance was already planning a different kind of reception for him in the morning. The calmness of the night was about to be replaced by a storm he never saw coming. Monday morning usually brought a heavy feeling of dread to Mike's stomach as he pulled into the gravel parking lot of the Swift Movers warehouse. The rusty sign above the office door swung in the wind, and the smell of diesel fuel from the trucks was overpowering. Usually, Mike would drag his feet, dreading the sound of Mr. Vance yelling about quotas. But this Monday was different. The sun was shining brightly, and for the first time in a long time, Mike felt a spark of hope in his chest. He parked his car and walked toward the building with a little extra spring in his step. He knew Keanu had promised to call, and knowing the actor, he knew he was a man of his word. Mike imagined the scene in his head. Vance would come out of his office, maybe even offering a rare smile. He would tell Mike that a huge celebrity endorsement was coming their way. Maybe, just maybe, Vance would finally see that treating people with respect actually paid off. Mike was ready to hear "good job." He was ready to feel like his hard work mattered. When he walked through the heavy bay doors, the warehouse was buzzing with activity. The other movers were loading trucks for the day, but the atmosphere felt strangely quiet as Mike walked past. A few guys looked at him, then quickly looked away, whispering to each other. Mike didn't think much of it. He figured they were just tired. He headed straight for the main office to drop off his weekly timesheet. The door to Mr. Vance's office was shut. Mike took a deep breath, knocked twice, and waited. "Get in here." The voice that came from inside was loud, sharp, and trembling with anger. Mike frowned, his hand pausing on the doorknob. Maybe Vance was having a bad morning. He opened the door and stepped inside. The small office was cramped, filled with stacks of paperwork and empty coffee cups. Vance was sitting behind his cluttered desk, his face turning a deep shade of red. He was holding the office phone in one hand, slamming it down repeatedly on the receiver as if trying to crush it. "Close the door," Vance barked, not looking at Mike. Mike closed the door gently. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. I just wanted to drop off my..." "Shut up, Mike." Vance yelled, finally looking up. His eyes were bulging, and veins were visible in his neck. Just shut up and sit down. I have never been so embarrassed in my entire life running this business. Mike stood frozen in the middle of the room. The hope he had felt just seconds ago began to drain away, replaced by a cold confusion. Embarrassed? What happened? Did I forget something on the truck on Friday? Forget something? Vance laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. He grabbed a pink message slip from his desk and threw it across the room at Mike. It fluttered to the floor near Mike's feet. You didn't forget anything. That's the problem. You decided to become a charity worker on my dime. Mike picked up the slip of paper. It had a name and a number scribbled on it, but no message. I don't understand. I got a call this morning, Vance seethed, standing up and leaning over his desk. A very famous client called me personally. Keanu Reeves? Does that name ring a bell, Mike, or were you too busy giving him free labor to notice who he was? He called, Mike asked, a small smile trying to form on his face. That's great. What did he say? He told me he was going to thank us. Oh, he thanked us all right, Vance spat. He went on and on about how wonderful you were. He told me how you stayed 4 hours past your shift. He told me how you and Dave took apart a grand piano, moved it across a rocky path, and reassembled it without a scratch. He told me you refused a cash tip because of company policy. Mike nodded, relieved. See, I was following the rules. I wanted to make sure we represented the company well. He was really happy. He said he would recommend us to everyone he knows. Vance slammed his hand on the desk so hard a coffee cup tipped over, spilling cold liquid onto the papers. Are you really this stupid, Mike? Do you have any idea how much that job should have cost? Mike blinked. We charged the base rate. The base rate, Vance shouted. That was a white glove service. That was a specialized move. You should have charged him an extra labor fee. You should have charged a bulky item handling fee. You should have charged for the disassembly and reassembly separately. That move was worth double, maybe triple what you charged. And you just let him walk away without paying a cent extra. Mike stared at his boss, unable to believe what he was hearing. But he liked that we didn't rip him off. He said he appreciated our honesty. Isn't that better than grabbing every penny we can? Honesty doesn't pay the bills, you fool. Greed pays the bills. Vance yelled, his face inches from Mike's. I run a business, not a fan club. I don't care if he liked your smile. I care that you wasted 4 hours of my company time, my truck, my fuel, my insurance, doing extra work that wasn't on the invoice. You gave away my inventory, Mike. Your time is my inventory, and you gave it away for free. But he's going to send us more clients, Mike argued, his voice rising in frustration. That's worth more than one extra fee. If his friends use us, we'll make 10 times that amount. Vance shook his head, looking at Mike with pure disgust. You are an idealistic idiot. Do you know how many times I hear I'll tell my friends? They never do. And even if they did, I can't trust you to handle them because you don't know how to maximize a profit. You let your feelings get in the way of business. Vance walked around the desk and got right in Mike's face. Do you know what he told me at the end of the call? He said, your guys are too good for you. He said, you should appreciate them. Can you believe the nerve of that guy telling me how to run my company? Vance turned his back on Mike and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. I don't need an employee who thinks he knows better than the owner. I don't need someone who conspires with clients behind my back. You made a fool out of me, Mike. You made me look like I don't know how to manage my own crew. I didn't mean to. Mike started, but Vance cut him off. I don't care what you meant, Vance said coldly, turning around. He opened a drawer, pulled out a termination form, and slapped it onto the desk. You are a liability. If I let you stay, you'll teach the other guys that it's okay to work for free. I can't have that. Mike stared at the paper. The words were already filled out. You're firing me for doing a good job. You're fired for gross negligence regarding company revenue, Vance said, his voice hard as stone. You cost us hundreds of dollars in potential profit today. I can't afford to keep you on the payroll. Because I helped someone, Mike asked, his voice shaking with anger. Because I refused to take advantage of a nice person. Because you didn't follow orders, Vance said. I told you to upsell. You did the opposite. Now get your stuff and get out of here. I don't want to see your face in my warehouse again. Mike stood there for a moment, his fists clenched tight at his sides. Every part of him wanted to yell, to tell Vance that he was a terrible boss and that this company was going to fail without people who actually cared about the work. But he knew it was useless. You can't argue with someone who only sees dollar signs. Mike unclipped his ID badge from his belt and tossed it onto the desk. It landed on the termination form with a soft thud. Fine, Mike said quietly. I'm leaving. But you're making a huge mistake. Keanu was right. We are too good for this place. Get out. Vance screamed, pointing a finger at the door. Mike turned and walked out of the office. He didn't look back. He walked through the warehouse, ignoring the whispers of the other movers. He walked out to his car, the sun now feeling mocking instead of warm. He sat in the driver's seat and just stared at the steering wheel. He had no job. He had no paycheck coming. He felt humiliated and angry. He pulled out his phone to text Dave, but then noticed a missed notification from a private number. It was from earlier that morning, right before he walked into the office. He didn't have time to check it then. With shaking hands, he unlocked his phone to listen to the voicemail, expecting it to be Vance telling him not to bother coming in. Instead, a calm, familiar voice filled his car. It was Keanu. Hi Mike, it's Keanu. Listen, I just got off the phone with your boss. Well, I tried to put in a good word for you, but it didn't go very well. He didn't seem to understand that good service has value. He actually hung up on me. I was pretty upset by the way he spoke about you. Anyway, I know it's none of my business, but if things go south over there, give me a call. I have a proposition for you. Mike sat in silence, the message sinking in. The anger in his chest began to cool, replaced by a strange sensation of disbelief. He looked up at the warehouse building where Vance was probably screaming at someone else. Mike started the engine. He wasn't defeated. Not by a long shot. Mike sat in his old sedan for a long time, the engine idling quietly. The air conditioning in his car was barely working, so the heat was starting to build up again, but he didn't notice. His mind was racing, spinning in circles. Just 10 minutes ago, he was worried about being late. Now, he didn't have a job to be late for. He felt sick to his stomach. Rent was due in 2 weeks. His car payment was due next week. Without a weekly paycheck, everything was going to fall apart. The anger at Vance was boiling inside him, making his hands shake as he gripped the steering wheel. How could a man be so heartless? How could he punish someone for doing a good job? He looked at his phone again. The voicemail from Keanu was still sitting there, waiting. Mike took a deep breath and pressed play again. He listened to the calm voice. "I tried to put in a good word for you, but it didn't go very well. If things go south over there, give me a call. I have a proposition for you." A proposition? What kind of proposition could a movie star have for a guy who moves furniture? Maybe Keanu needed some shelves put up. Maybe he wanted to hire him for a day just to help out as a favor. That would be a few $100s, enough for groceries, but it wouldn't solve the long-term problem. Still, it was better than nothing. Mike felt a small flicker of hope mixed with his anxiety. At least one person in the world appreciated him. With trembling fingers, Mike dialed the number back. He didn't know what he was going to say. "Hello, Mr. Reeves, thanks for calling. I just got fired by the jerk you yelled at." It sounded unreal. The phone rang twice before a professional-sounding woman answered. "Mr. Reeves' office. How can I help you?" Hi," Mike stammered. "My name is Mike. I'm a mover. I think I missed a call from Mr. Keanu Reeves." Mike," the woman said, her tone warm and friendly. "Hold on 1 second, please. He has been waiting for your call." There was a brief click, and then a moment of silence. Mike's heart pounded against his ribs like a drum. Then, he heard that familiar voice. "Mike, hey, man. It's Keanu." "Hi," Mike managed to squeak out. "I got your message. And, well, you were right. Things went south. Vance fired me about 5 minutes ago." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then Keanu let out a long sigh. "I am so sorry, Mike. I truly am. When I spoke to your boss, I told him that he had a diamond in the rough with you. I told him that your honesty was rare. He told me I didn't understand business and hung up on me. I was furious. I still am." Mike felt a lump form in his throat. It was strange to hear a famous person defending him so passionately. "It's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but I'm not surprised. He only cares about money." "Well, I care about people," Keanu said firmly. "And I want to help. Listen, I have a lot of projects going on. I have a private workshop for my motorcycles, I have an archery range that needs constant maintenance, and I have a lot of equipment that needs to be moved around for my training. I go through staffing agencies, but honestly they always send people who steal or break things or just don't care." Mike stayed quiet, listening. "I need someone I can trust," Keanu continued. "Someone with a good head on their shoulders who isn't looking to rip me off. When I saw how you handled that piano, and when you refused the tip, that told me everything I needed to know about your character. You have integrity, Mike." "Thank you," Mike whispered. "I can't offer you a moving job exactly," Keanu said. "But I need a head of logistics for my personal projects. I need a guy to manage the shop, handle the inventory, and oversee the crews when we need to move heavy set pieces for my personal projects. It would be a salary position, with full benefits, health insurance, and a retirement plan." Mike nearly dropped the phone. A salary benefits? He had never had benefits in his life. He always paid for his doctor's visits out of pocket. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come by and talk to me," Keanu said. "I'm at the studio downtown right now. Can you be here in an hour? We can talk details, and I can show you around." "Yes," Mike said without hesitation. "Yes, I can be there." "Great. Drive safe." Mike hung up the phone. For a second, he just sat there, letting the words sink in. Then, he laughed out loud. It was a loud, crazy laugh that bounced off the windows of his car. He looked at the warehouse building one last time. Somewhere inside that building, Mr. Vance was probably yelling at Dave for not working fast enough. Vance thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought Mike was a fool for giving away free labor. But Vance was wrong. Being smart wasn't just about counting pennies, it was about valuing people. Mike put the car in gear and drove out of the parking lot. He didn't look in the rearview mirror. He drove toward downtown Los Angeles, toward the studio district. The traffic was heavy, as always, but the cars didn't bother him anymore. He turned up the radio and rolled down the windows, letting the wind blow through his hair. He felt lighter than air. When he arrived at the studio, the security guard handed him a visitor pass and directed him to Building C. It was a large, modern structure with sleek glass doors. Mike walked inside, feeling a little out of place in his dusty work boots and jeans. But as soon as he walked into the main bay, he saw Keanu. The actor was standing near a workbench, looking over some blueprints. He was dressed simply, again in jeans and a t-shirt. He looked up and smiled when he saw Mike. "Mike." Keanu walked over and shook his hand warmly. "Thanks for coming. I'm really glad you made it." "Thanks for having me," Mike said. "Come on, let me show you around," Keanu said, leading him deeper into the building. It was incredible. There was a section full of motorcycles in various stages of repair, chrome gleaming, engines exposed. There was another area with bows and arrows and targets for archery. It looked like a playground for someone who loved action and mechanics. But it was also organized. Everything was labeled. Everything was clean. "This is my private space," Keanu explained. "I spend a lot of time here when I'm not filming. But keeping it running is a full-time job. I need someone who can manage the schedules, handle the equipment, and make sure things are safe. Like I said on the phone, I can't trust just anyone with this stuff." Mike looked around, impressed. "It's amazing." "So," Keanu said, leaning against a workbench, "the job pays double what you were making at Swift Movers. Plus full health, dental, and vision. And a year-end bonus. I need someone to start immediately." Mike did the math in his head. Double his previous salary, that was more money than he had ever dreamed of making. That meant he could fix his car. He could get a better apartment. He could finally stop worrying about the bills. He looked at Keanu, searching for any sign of a joke, but the actor's face was serious. "You're serious?" Mike asked. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," Keanu said. "I know you're a hard worker. I know you're honest. And I know you're the kind of guy who helps a neighbor move a piano for free because it's the right thing to do. You can't teach that, Mike. You either have it or you don't. You have it." Mike felt a warmth spreading through his chest. He thought about Mr. Vance firing him for losing a few $100s in fees. Vance played the short game. Keanu was playing the long game. Vance saw a worker. Keanu saw a partner. "Then I'm in," Mike said, a huge smile breaking across his face. "I would love to work for you." "Excellent," Keanu said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Welcome to the team. Oh, and one more thing." "What's that?" "Vance called me back about 10 minutes ago," Keanu said, grinning. "He realized who I was and tried to apologize. He wanted to know if I still needed movers for the future. I told him no. I told him I found someone better. Mike laughed, a loud, happy sound that echoed in the large studio. I bet he didn't like that. He didn't, Keanu chuckled. But that's not our problem anymore. Let's get you set up with an ID badge. Mike walked out of that studio an hour later with a new job, a new sense of purpose, and a business card in his pocket. As he drove home, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He thought about the crazy chain of events that had led him here. He had lost his job because he was too nice. But being too nice was exactly what had saved him. He realized that in a world full of sharks like Mr. Vance, being a good person was dangerous. But sometimes, just sometimes, the universe noticed. And sometimes, the person you helped wasn't just a customer. They were the person who would change your life. Mike turned up the radio and sang along to the music, driving toward his future, leaving the angry warehouse and the greedy boss far behind in the dust.